You know, first aid at work, it's actually a legal requirement for every single employer in the UK. But here's the thing, what that actually looks like can be wildly different. I mean, it could be a simple stocked kit in an office, or it could be a whole team of highly trained people on a busy construction site. So how do you figure out what's right for your workplace? Okay, let's dive into the essentials.
So, here's what we're going to cover in this explainer. First, we're going to bust a major myth about first aid rules. Then, we'll get crystal clear on the 2 key roles you might have. After that, we'll look at exactly what needs to be in your first aid kit, how you go about choosing the right training, and to finish up, we'll tackle some of the most common questions people ask.
All right, first things first. Let's jump right in by tackling one of the biggest misconceptions out there. This is a question that honestly causes a ton of confusion for employers.
So, what do you think? It seems like a no-brainer, right? Of course you need one. But the actual legal answer, well, it might just surprise you. And there you have it. The reality is a whole lot more nuanced than just a simple yes or no. The law doesn't use a one-size-fits-all rule. Instead, the responsibility is on the employer to figure out what is adequate and appropriate for their specific situation. The big question then is, how in the world are you supposed to figure that out?
Well, the answer all comes down to this one critical process: the first aid needs assessment. And look, this is not just some box-ticking exercise. This is the absolute foundation of your entire first aid plan. Pretty much everything else we're going to talk about today flows directly from what you find in this assessment.
So, what actually goes into this assessment? You've got to consider a whole bunch of factors. It's more than just the obvious stuff like workplace hazards and how many people you employ. You also need to think about things like shift patterns, what happens when people are on holiday or sick, and even how far away you are from the nearest hospital. And if you have customers or members of the public on site, you need to factor them in too. Now, let's see how this assessment helps you decide who you need on your team.
Okay, so once you've done all that work and finished your needs assessment, the result is going to point you toward one of 2 key roles for handling first aid, and it is absolutely crucial to understand the difference between them. Okay, let's break this down, because the difference is huge. On one hand, you have an appointed person. The key thing to know here? No formal first aid training is required. Their job is basically to look after the kit and call 999 when things go wrong. On the other hand, you have a first aider. This is someone who's gone through certified training and is qualified to actually provide hands-on care.
So it all comes back to this one idea. Your assessment dictates your need. A small, low-risk office? You might only need an appointed person. But a big manufacturing plant with heavy machinery? Yeah, you're almost certainly going to need fully trained first aiders. It's a tailored solution, not a one-size-fits-all jacket.
Okay, so we've covered the people. Now let's talk about the gear, the equipment, because regardless of whether you have an appointed person or a full-fledged first aider, every single workplace must have a suitably stocked first aid kit.
So what are we looking at here? This is what the guidance suggests as a bare minimum for a low-risk spot, like an office or a shop. Think of it as your starting point. You've got the essentials: plasters, dressings, bandages, and of course, disposable gloves, which are so important. But there's a really critical rule about what shouldn't be in there.
Okay, listen up, because this one is absolutely non-negotiable. Your workplace first aid box should never, ever contain tablets or medicines. The role of a first aider is not to be a pharmacist. It's about giving immediate help for injuries and illness, not handing out medication. Keeping pills in the box is just asking for trouble.
And look, it sounds obvious, but a kit is only useful if it's actually ready to go, right? So make it a regular habit to check the expiry dates on things, and if you use something, replace it right away. An empty box is zero help in an emergency. Now, let's switch gears. Let's say your needs assessment comes back and says, yep, you need a trained first aider. So what does that training actually look like? What's involved? Basically, you've got 2 main levels. Think of EFAW, or Emergency First Aid at Work, as your one-day crash course in saving a life. It covers the absolute essentials for those really serious emergencies. Then you have FAW, or First Aid at Work. This one's more comprehensive, usually a 3-day course, and it covers everything in EFAW plus a much wider range of injuries and illnesses. Your assessment will point you to which one is right for you.
So how do you pick a provider? Well, it's actually your responsibility as an employer, but the process is pretty straightforward. First, you use your assessment to figure out if you need EFAW or FAW. Then you find a competent provider and you do your homework, what the HSE calls due diligence, to make sure they're properly qualified and have solid quality control.
And this is great because it shows you've got options. You're not locked into one path. You can go with providers offering nationally regulated qualifications. You can use the big, well-known charities like St. John Ambulance or the British Red Cross, or you can even use a smaller, independent provider as long as you've checked them out and can prove they know their stuff.
All right, we have covered a ton of ground. We've gone from the big myth to the key roles, the kits, and the training. So let's wrap this up by hitting some of the most common questions that pop up all the time.
Okay, this is the big one. And it's a totally understandable fear that can stop people from volunteering. You know, what if I do something wrong? What if I make it worse? Can I get into legal trouble? And here's the official word, straight from the health and safety executive. The most important part of that sentence is using the first aid training they have received. As long as you are acting in good faith and just doing what you were taught to do, the chance of any legal action is extremely, extremely low.
Here's another really common question. Your main certificate is good for 3 years, but let's be honest, skills can get rusty. So, are you legally required to do a refresher course every single year?
The short answer is no. It's not mandatory, but, and this is a really big but, it is strongly recommended. Think about it. Procedures can change, and it's just so easy to forget the little details when you're under pressure. An annual refresher is just a fantastic way to keep those life-saving skills sharp.
And it's just so important to remember where all of this comes from. Everything we've discussed today, the needs assessment, the different roles, the kits, the training, it's all grounded in one key piece of legislation, the Health and Safety First Aid Regulations from way back in 1981. This is the law that sets out an employer's duty of care.
So there you have it. We've gone from myth to reality, from people to kits, and right through the core legal requirements. But the final question really isn't for me to answer. It's for you. When you think about your own office, your shop, or your factory, is it truly prepared for an emergency?